Hello everybody, welcome back to the Astral Jewels platform. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're riding the waves of life and not falling off the surfboard too many times. And speaking of falling off the surfboard, I'm going to talk about astrology and why it's a good thing to understand astrology and particularly your own chart. There is an assumption that people know what astrology is about, but the longer I practice the craft of astrology, the more I see how people have been misguided by what they are hearing and what they're reading. So, and I received this request recently, which said, I would love to hear more about the natal chart and how it can guide me. So I'm going to place some energy into the fundamentals of astrology so you can see it as a tool that can help you through your life. Okay, so firstly, a bit of history. The art of fathoming astrology was, it was all about psychology. And astrology is the original basis for psychology and still is. Though you'll not hear, of course, you won't hear about that in university, getting your psych degree. They have distanced themselves from anything to do with pseudoscience. But once you begin to comprehend the meanings of stars and planets, the more you see this. Bear in mind that psychology has grown many tentacles, and particularly in the last 50 years or so, with extra names for so many mental phenomena. However, without the tentacles, psychology is actually mimicking the actions of the planets and stars, and it doesn't have to be so mind-boggling. We are matter. Yes, we matter. We are matter. And we are governed and influenced by the field. You would have heard that term. And that field is the field of stars and planets, and also part of the quantum field on a higher level. It takes a depth of involution to experience this layers and see it for yourself. What it is that the quantum field actually is. It is also known as an unfallen layer of planets and stars. It's a layer that is pure and unpolluted by the dross we are in, here on terra firma or underneath the firmament. So to comprehend the influence of the stars and planets, firstly, I want to ask a question. What is the definition of the soul? And I've heard many different answers to that. And this is something worth knowing. According to ancient Greek literature, the soul is the psyche. And another term for this influence is known as astrality. The term astral comes from the word aster, which is the influence of the stars and the planets. Ancient Greek literature will tell you that. So also in Greek, the term zodiac relates to the zoo, which primarily represents animals. And you'll notice that most of the constellations are represented by animals. Humans are also animals. Yes, we are. We have what differentiates the human from, your cat and dog or the horses is the fact that we have a vertical spine and animals are more horizontal. Yes, animals do have consciousness, and I can't remember my incarnations as a cat or a dog or a horse or a cow, whatever. So I can't comprehend the consciousness of an animal, but we humans are conscious that we are conscious, and that's one of the major differences that we know of. I'm not going to argue with all the pet owners out there. So I'm actually going to invite you to read a blog that I wrote quite a while ago. The article is Forces and Their Effects on Us, and it's on my website. I think I'll actually, I will be putting this video on my website as well. But you know, these are the links to that, and it's quite a comprehensive blog, giving more aspects to astrology and forces. And I'm also quoting or referencing Bruce Lipton, because he himself has come to realize the importance of astrology, the stars and the planets and their influence on us. So it's an easy read. So, you know, don't worry about it getting, you know, too complicated, but it is worth having a read, having a delve into that. Okay. So, you know, the influence of the planets and stars is, you know, it's known as astrology, as in aster and, you know, or astral worlds. It's one of the reasons why I've chosen astral jewels, because my craft, my passion is all about the astral worlds. So astral is all about our thoughts and emotions. It's the influence of the planets and stars on our psyche, which creates our emotions, our thoughts and emotions. So hence astral jewels, because I'm no different to you. I have emotions and thoughts that often get out of control. You know, this is a term, you know, astrology or astrology and astral. It's a term that I like to use personally when I'm referring to the planetary influence on me and all of you as well. So it's important now to comprehend the terminology, as it may help you unravel some nebulous terms that are quite often seen as, you know, they're quite common, but they're nebulous and they're confusing. And, you know, I've heard many people give different definitions to what the soul is. So I want to state that the soul equals the psyche, which equals the ego. Now, all of the above terms can be intertwining or mean the same thing, but you know, you can delve into each of them and you can separate out the soul from the psyche and the ego, but they very much are intertwined. You can't separate them. You can't separate them out. So all of the above, the soul, psyche, ego, are influenced by the vibrations of the planets and stars. And each time we incarnate, this happens. And know that if you can use the highest vibrations of the planets to your advantage, you're nailing life. You're getting it. Before having a look at an actual chart, which I'm going to show you, know that each planet and star has its own individual vibration. And the combination of forces you have when you are born is like the software that you yourself are running on. Those vibrations create the imprint of your psyche. It's what you use while you're here. It is indeed. Now, having a look at this next slide, you might want to expand your your screen to get to this. But here we've got, as I've said, the soul equals the psyche equals the ego. So you've got the psyche equals astrality, which is planetary forces. And each planet has a higher and lower mode, a positive and a negative, and their reflections and mirrors that come from that. Ego is the influence of astrality and can be divided into a higher mode or a lower mode, or a positive or negative, or transformed or fallen. And a transformed ego is retained by the soul, and it's engaged in future incarnations. And this is the evolution of the soul, or spiritual evolution. So I'm going to have a look at a person's chart and we can piece this all together. So I'm going to focus on the planets and astrality. And if you can transpose astrality as being your ego, you are ahead of the game, and this will help you to navigate life. Now, this is far, far better than continually saying your ego is the problem. Trust me, that is a never-ending battle of word gravity that doesn't serve you. All you do is dump on yourself and other people when you say it, because the ego is the self. And you cannot have a human existence without an ego. So whether you're in 3D, 4D, or 5D and beyond, a human experience requires an ego. So it's best you know it and learn how to navigate life, so you can go into the unfallen elements of astrality and thereby have an unfallen ego or transformed ego. This is what inner work is all about: transforming and becoming the best version of yourself. It's your soul's work. Your ego is not the problem. Your fallen ego is the problem. And your fallen ego is your emotional reactions to what you experience in life. The fallenness is the part of you that has to justify itself in the world and prove its value, and it moans and groans because it's too hard. That's fallenness. That's not being able to handle the forces. That's all it is. You can't handle the astrality that's bearing down on you. You're not holding it right. You're not riding the waves. The unfallen is pure astrality. And the unfallen purity of astrality is the amazing you that is in touch with your higher self. When you're in that part of yourself, when you've transformed, you're amazing. It's an amazing experience. And it's the ego. It's the unfallen ego. So where you stand on this spectrum of fallenness and unfallenness is determined by how you navigate life. So we're going to have a look at the charts, some chart wheels, okay? So this is an astrological wheel which shows each planet's position to the constellation, and also is divided into houses 1 through to 12, and you'll see those numbers on the outer side of the wheel that I've created there. So the center circle can represent you. Well, it does. It represents you at the center, coming through the birth canal. And at the exact time, date, and place of your birth, this is the position of the planets that make up your blueprint. This is your astral body for life. You know, there are the set of forces you are. This is in fact the set of forces that you are using throughout your life. And this set of forces makes up your psyche. So some of these forces may, lay dormant until a later date. It doesn't all happen at once when you're a baby. This is development. So some forces show up as a result of experiences and meetings with certain people. So maybe when you reach adulthood and you get a job, that will activate even more. But as a baby, they're developing their personality. Personality is the psyche. It's the characters that you formulate them as a result of the experiences. And the experiences you have are driven by the astrology, and that astrology is your imprint, the time, at the exact date and time and place of your birth. So that's how it works. So it can depend on your environment and the influence of your parents as to which forces become dominant and which ones don't show up at all. So there's a lot of forces in that chart. There's a lot of angles. There's lines going everywhere. There's heaps of planets, and there's some symbols in there that are not planets, and they all have a meaning. And for some, not everything comes out. It's like a kaleidoscope of forces that is at your disposal. So those that don't show up can be seen as missing bits in your psyche. This is a term that you can use. There's something's missing. There's something I can't do, but I'm going to explain more on that later. Okay. So houses. When I do the planetary reviews, you don't see the houses, right? I use them in natal readings, and they're very, very necessary. So houses are determined by the time you were born, which is why I ask for the exact time you were born when I do readings. Okay, each house determines the focus of what you experience. So an example of this is the first house is to do with who you are. And it's the I am focus. It's also what other people see of you, usually first. And often people, you yourself may not notice these traits in yourself, but other people will notice, because it's the first thing that you actually present to the world. And you probably take it for granted. Now, in this chart, this person doesn't have a planet in the first house, but it's primarily in the constellation of Aries, and Aries is ruled by Mars. So what we look for is the trait of Mars in this person's personality, the I am. So this person will be seen as willful and assertive. They've got a Mars force, they're action type people. The rising sign is in Pisces for this person. So they have a strong Piscean nature. So they are willful and assertive, yet, have a soft underbelly, which is the energy of Neptune, which rules Pisces. Most likely this person is a spiritual seeker, an intuitive, and even a visionary. For having Mars, they're putting a lot of will into the Pisces energy or the Neptune energy. So your ascendant is where the sun was rising when you were born. So it's really quite a significant position in a person's chart. I call it the ascendant as the sun is rising, but you will hear it as the rising sign. Okay, well, I'm going to continue through the houses because it's going to give you a little bit of background as to, you know, what readings occur. So for this person, there are 2 planets in the next house, which is Venus and the Sun in the 2nd house, and primarily in the constellation of Taurus. So this person is quite sociable, which is one of the Sun-Venus traits. And the 2nd house is the house of values. So we covered this last week as, you know, as when I did the review, because globally Uranus has just gone into Taurus, and Taurus and values go together. So unless there are difficulties in this person's environment and upbringing, they will be heading toward a healthy value system. What I've noticed is the Sun and Venus is afflicted in this chart as they, the Sun and Venus square Pluto. So there is a series of transformations to occur before this person starts to see their value. So Pluto will affect a transformation to whatever it's connected to. So in this case, it was the Sun and Venus. So the next house is the 3rd house and is primarily in Gemini. And in this house, it's the planet of, it's ruled by Mercury. 3rd house and Mercury go together. So Mercury is at home in Gemini and also the 3rd house. So this person is very good with communication. And the symbol next to Mercury is called the part of fortune, which it relates to where a person gets joy in life. You can say it's fortunate. So this person not only is a good communicator, but actually likes to communicate because it's part of fortune. It gives them joy, gives them pleasure. So the next house is the 4th house, and it's in Cancer, and there is a Moon-Uranus conjunction. So a conjunction is when the planets are close together. So it's you know, within 10 degrees. So the 4th here, you know, it's ruled by Cancer and has to do with the foundations of a person's upbringing, to childhood. So the early stages of life, the formative years. And I bet this person had a difficult time growing up. So why do I say that? Uranus and the Moon, it's very awakening. It's a very awakening combination, and it's to do with nurturing and caring. And it affects the feelings of the child growing up. So Cancer has to do with the mother. So it's likely there was conflict with the mother, because Uranus is it's an awakening and a shocking type of energy. So Uranus and the Moon is more awakening than it is tender and soft. Yeah, and likely there was some shocking experiences for this person growing up in their childhood because it was in their formative years. So when doing a person's chart, and if I saw this force, I'd be asking questions about their upbringing and how they are doing as an adult or a teenager. How is life? How are you going? So this combination could have caused trauma if it wasn't handled well by the mother and, of course, the child. If this was too much for the child, those experiences that were created by Uranus Moon, the shocking experiences, then there's likely a difficult imprint in the child's psyche that would need to be dealt with. Okay, this is where inner work helps if the child, particularly if the child can't remember. So in the formative years, things could happen before the age of 1 and anywhere between birth and 10 years old. Generally, it's to 7. So that's the formative period, but it continues on, of course. But for this child, whatever happened in their childhood would have created a huge imprint, as it does with anyone. But it depends on what the planets are that are in the 4th as to how it's going to affect the child. Okay, moving on. The 5th house is primarily in Leo for this person, which has to do with creativity, joy, and the children this person may have. It's generally ruled by the sun. This person has Pluto in this house. So creativity and joy may be a little elusive, and meaning that, Pluto is deep, and this person has to dive deep within themselves to find what gives them joy. The same with creativity. It will have, creativity will have depth and meaning. Whatever it is that they do in terms of creativity, it has got to have depth because of this Pluto. So Pluto can be difficult to tap into. So it may take a lot of life experience for them to realize any creative potential that they have. Regardless, Pluto has little time for shallowness. So there has to be meaning and depth to whatever this person likes. And being in Leo, which is ruled by the sun, it may require this person to be confident and assertive in order to find the joy in their life. They may have to go towards the sun because it might be too difficult to get into the depths of the Pluto. So you'd flip it a bit and get into the sun, and being into the sun will also help you go deeper and deeper into yourself. Okay, it might be a little bit confusing, but are you getting the picture to the house system? Okay, and how it helps to define what's going on in a person's chart. So I'll just keep going through the rest of them. So the 6th house has to do with service towards others, and it's often your job. So if you're working for an employer, you are the employee, and it also has to do with your health. The 7th house has to do with close relationships like husband and wife, your marriage, whether you're likely to get married or not. This person has Neptune in their 7th house, so they're looking for probably a very ideal type of situation, and it might be out of the grasp of getting it if it's Neptunian. They might have ideals that are just beyond what somebody can give them. And often you might want to flip that. So a person who's relying on a Neptune type of person will actually need a Saturn, a more Saturnian type of person, someone that's going to give them structure. Somebody who's reliable and responsible and can help take care of this person. Not that this person needs to be taken care of, but there would be an expectation in this person's life of having an ideal partner. Okay. So onward, the 8th house is the house of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So it's ruled by Pluto and relates to the constellation of Scorpio. So we're talking about the depth of a person, occult experiences, right? It's not the occult. Occult experiences are anything that's hidden, and it's generally to do with spiritual realms, spiritual experiences. The abilities that you have in terms of being psychic, for example, or having healing abilities. This is all occult. Okay, so don't get it confused with that other term that, you know, is seen as a negative, right? So depths, occult experiences, and also transformation. Rule the 8th house. So the 9th house is to do with truth and justice, higher universal laws, and overseas travel, long journeys. It is currently seen as the house of lower law, if you take the, you know, the earthly judiciary into account, which is extremely corrupted. The 9th house is ruled by Jupiter, and it relates to the constellation of Sagittarius. So the Jupiterian values come in here. Expansion. This is, you know, in this person's chart, they've got Jupiter in the 9th house. So it's very likely that this person has traveled overseas, probably more than once, but it's to do with long journeys, not the short ones. Short journeys are to do with Mercury. So this person's probably done both because they've got Mercury in Gemini as well, and in the 3rd house. Okay. So the 10th house relates to what you do. It's about your career. It's about your fame and how you do things. So the 10th is ruled by Capricorn, and the planet that rules this house is Saturn. Saturn and Capricorn go together. Okay. The 11th house relates to your friends, acquaintances, communities and groups, and can also be family members you are not close to. So that's not the intimate relationships. Okay. It's ruled by Aquarius, and the planet is Uranus that goes with the 11th. Good old Uranus. The 12th house is the house of endings and completion, and it can also relate to large institutions like libraries and the like, you know, great big government buildings, for example. Hospitals would also be seen as large institutions. So it's ruled by Pisces, and the planet is Neptune. So the 12th house can also be seen as the house of hidden enemies on lower mode. These are people that, you know, you thought were your friends, but turn out not to be. The enemies are hidden. They're happening in the background and you don't know it. People who gossip about you negatively, that's a hidden enemy, in fact. So are you being a hidden enemy to somebody? Just be careful with your gossip. You know, if there are planets in the 12th house, it can relate to there being a culmination of the human experience, because it's the house of endings. So anyone with one or more planets in the 12th often has a focused life and the intention of finalizing a particular path of evolution. And they may also have spiritual realizations on the road to achieving a completion of this cycle, or of a cycle. For them, it could be the cycle of achieving enlightenment. That's, you know, that's what they're pushing for. So as well as the house system, there is also the constellations, of course, and the planets in the house and in a constellation will give certain reading. You know, the time gives the houses. You need the time to get an accurate picture of the houses. The date gives the positions of planets and constellations, and the place gives the exact measurement of longitude and latitude. You You know, astrology is all calculated by maths. And in India, it is actually given the status of a science. It is science. And it's taken very seriously in India. The whole Indian culture very much is still very aware of the influence of the astral realms, the planets and stars. And they've kept it as a science. In most countries, however, it is pseudoscience and given no respect. So because it is pseudoscience, it's been demoted to an amusement status, and it's just not taken seriously by most. If you ever speak to an astronomer, they generally scoff at astrology. And yet in the ancient days, they were never separate. They were both one. Astrology and astronomy were the same thing. This is where we've got in terms of what the Cabal have done. Okay, so just a little bit more before going through the angles, because it's the angles that I focus on more than anything else in a chart. The planets and the angles make huge imprints on your psyche, and knowing these is very helpful in navigating life, and I'll show you some examples shortly. So before that, I want to explain why I don't just stick with the sun sign. As you can see by the wheel, it's very busy. There are heaps of planets, lines everywhere, signs and houses. And if you only focus on the sun sign, you miss out on the big picture. And that picture is cosmic. It's huge. It says so much. And also for many people, their sun is difficult to access. So it won't play a dominant role in their life. This is why, in part, when people read their horoscopes, nothing makes sense. People can't relate to the horoscopes because they are not in touch with their sun force. So go back and have a look at the planetary forces that I did and look at the sun force, and you get an idea of whether you're actually in it or not. And generally people can be more easily in their lower mode than in the higher mode of the sun. And personally, horoscopes can be horrible. And they are so generalized, they can have little meaning. And at best, I relegate them to entertainment, but I don't ever take them seriously. You know, as I've mentioned many times, I am a sidereal astrologer, and the position of planets to the constellations is 23.4 degrees different between the sidereal system and the tropical system. That's huge. That's a big difference. Now, tropical is mainstream and, of course, was interfered with by the Cabal. Like everything in life, the Cabal has taken something sacred and valuable and skewed it to confuse people. It's what they do. Nothing has not been interfered with by the Cabal. Nothing. And what better way to mess with people's minds than the majority of people thinking they are a sign they are not. I've spoken about this before, and I keep speaking about it, and more people are actually waking up to it. And there are more truthers out there that are actually starting to have a little delve have a bit of a study, and they're starting to speak up. Sidereal astrology is in line with the sky. It's visible. It's verified by astrophysicists. It is used by astronomers. And the position of planets in constellations is visual. You can see it with your own eyes, or with the telescope, because some things you can't see with your own eyes. When you comprehend the planets, you will comprehend the sidereal model, and it all makes perfect sense. So I take the energy off the constellation and I place it on the planets, and that's where you get a very comprehensive reading by using the planets. But then I put the planets with the real constellations that are affecting you, not the ones that are out, but the real ones, right? The ones that's exact to your chart. So having, said that, the angles of one planet to another is actually the same in both systems. But if astrologers only focus on constellations, you miss the information you need. That is, and that information, it's the entire pie that is your chart. Right, so if you pay $10 to get your chart done, you're getting nothing. It's just generalized false information. It's very likely that's what you're getting. And people's minds are so impressionable, they'll believe it. And then you're trying to be something that you're actually not. And you need to learn how to be authentic. Right? Okay. Now I'm going to go through a few angles so that you get a picture of how the forces imprint the psyche. And only a few, because we'd be here for hours if I went through all of them. Just astrology is quite massive when you take into account all of these different positions. So I've just named a few, and there's just so many more. And your chart is so complex. There's way more to you than you even can comprehend. So I'm going to read a few interpretations, and I'm sure some of you will resonate with one or more, or all of them. So depending on how in touch with yourself you are. So the key is to ask yourself whether you are using the forces and whether you are flowing with them or struggling. This is why I use the analogy of the surfboard. So you're either riding it or you've fallen off, and you need to get back on the surfboard and ride the waves. Okay, the waves are made up of the forces and also your ability to navigate. Okay. So seeing this astrology wheel may make you think it's just too much. And, no way can I understand this, and I get it. But part of my job is to help you comprehend it. When I do readings, the client gets, a 35+ page report, which is their blueprint for life. And then we get together for a session, it's one-on-one, to make sure that you fathom what's in your hands. Okay, otherwise you've wasted your money. Okay, I'm wanting to make sure that you really comprehend these forces and relate it to your life. I literally taught myself astrology after I had my own reading, and that was many moons ago. I've been an astrologer for approximately 24 years, going on 25 years. So I went over my chart hundreds of times. A lot I couldn't relate to, and some I could, but a lot I couldn't. I still have my printout, and I keep it handy just to show you. That's mine, and it's got everything that I need to know about my own chart. Right? I keep it in a great little folder, and it's got everything that I need to know about the forces that are influencing me. So it's quite complex, but you're not expected to be an astrologer. And of course, to get your astrology chart doesn't mean that you have to know everything about astrology. But I look at my blueprint even now. I started observing other people's charts, and I just kept going with the craft. And learning astrology for me was life-changing. Of course, it's my profession, it's my passion, it's what I do. But it's when I began to see my own potential. And now I see way beyond my potential. And I'm seeing my higher self. And prior to that, I see myself as a lost soul. And seeing this potential was, it was like a dangled carrot of, oh my God, is this me? Is this what I have? Could I possibly do that? And then knowing this, it was life-changing, and I started changing, and I started, instead of feeling defeated, which is very much a victim character, a victim trait, I started to see possibilities, and it gave me some strength. And I started walking towards my, what it was showing me, what was my potential, because it was there and available. I just had to use the forces, and I had to learn how to use the forces, which is you learning how to do things in life, right? It's not some wafty thing. The forces help you bring out personality traits that enable you to do things. You've got to be a participant in this, right? Things will happen by default by planets and forces. They will. Shit happens, right? And that's because you've got no control over the forces. You've not taken charge, and you need to take charge. And when you know what you've got to work with, then you're not pushing it uphill. You've got something to work with. Okay. So as I've said, there's a lot of planetary angles in a chart. So I'm just going to go through a few, and that's for this person as well. Okay. So firstly, let's look at Mars on the ascendant. And I think Donald Trump has Mars on his ascendant. Okay, I did Donald Trump's chart, so you might want to go back and have a look at that one. So he also has Mars on the ascendant. And so for this person, it's in the 12th house, and the ascendant is in Pisces. And this is the rising sign. It's where the sun was rising when this person was born. And it has significance in the chart. Anything on your ascendant, and the ascendant itself is significance for each of you. So the meaning is that the Mars force is strengthened in its position to the ascendant. Because it's there, it's even stronger. So this aspect to the ascendant gives energy and vitality to the person. This person is willful, and even more so. So people might actually be intimidated by these people because they have will and they do things, and they will appear not to be as frightened as you perhaps. But it's not that a Mars ascendant makes you you know, it's not that you're not frightened, it's that you don't let fear rule your life. So this person will push through willfully into things, right? They overcome, they try to overcome. And there's negatives to everything. So it can also give a tendency to overspend the vitality and push oneself towards extremes. So this person can seem extreme. Another reason why they appear to be intimidating. So this may call for a need to learn how to rest and relax. So strong Mars people can exhaust themselves, and if they don't find balance between exertion and resting the body, they need, they'll end up being ill. They're depleting their energy, so they need to find balance. So Mars, for this person, they have a Mars sextile to the Sun. So a sextile angle is a 60-degree angle. So they're apart by 60 degrees. And this imprints a flavor of having willpower, Mars, and a born warrior. Think of the Leo force. They're generally brave and confident is what Leo, that's where they end up. But these two forces together, they enhance each other. And they're born fighters, and they have an innate need to conquer. So whatever challenges come their way, right, I'm going to do it. So they will have self-confidence and be ambitious, and they have a need to succeed. Yay. These people are born leaders. I think Trump had a Mars sun. I can't remember. This is the thing with astrology. There is so much information that I struggle to retain all of. If I've done 10 charts in a week, I cannot remember the first chart I did because it's been overridden by all the others that I've done. This is what happens with astral forces. It's just mind-boggling, the amount of information that comes with astral forces. But yeah, these people are born leaders. They're absolutely amazing. It's a great force to have. And having a Mars sun in a person's chart, it begs the question, what are you doing with this amazing force, right? So there can be a desire to step up and step forward, but because of difficulties in a person's past, perhaps they are too afraid to use it or to step forward, right? This force, it has enormous potential, and knowing that it exists, it's a tempter for people. You have this inside you, so use it. And if I had my own business and I was actually hiring people, I'd want to see their chart to see if they are leaders or at least responsible people. That's I've often thought of, seeing this as such an asset for employment agencies, because I can see their personality and I can see their potential. And you generally know if somebody is a responsible person by their chart. So, if somebody had this Sun Mars in the chart and they were not leaders, if they struggled to be upfront and out there, I'd be going, what happened? Why are you not using this force? Why can't you? So then we would check on what those issues are that are holding the person back. But this massive potential, whoa. And maybe these people come out and they're way too over the top. They're overbearing and they're just assholes, right? That's a misuse of, leaders are those that can do for themselves, and they lead by example. They're not leaders over you. They don't dominate you, okay? So there is a lower mode to it as well. Of course there is, to every force. Okay, a Sun-Pluto force. Now, this person has a Sun that is squaring Pluto. Now, a square is a 90-degree angle and represents a challenge. And if you've not seen my podcast on the Luciferic influence of astrology, I suggest you go and look at it, because there I brought up the fact that 23.4 degree difference between the two systems, if you take 23.4 degrees away from 90 degrees, you get 66.6. Now, if that's not something to convince you there's something really wrong with mainstream astrology, I can't help you. There's something very cabal about what's been going on here. Anyway, they've used the 90-degree angle and turned it luciferic. Okay, it isn't. A challenge in your life is something that you have to work with, and it's in your face. And this person is no different. So they've got a Sun-Pluto square, and they've had to deal with this. So any squares in a chart will be experienced as a challenge or difficulty for the person, and is something to work on for generally their entire life, unless they are really good at mastering forces. And in the later period of their life, generally from say 55 onward, they will have mastered their challenges. They've become really good at it. Okay, so with the Sun-Pluto square, you have a combination of forces which influences the person to undergo a major inner transformation during their incarnation. So the square is a pillar for change in the chart. You're going to change. Okay. So how much these transformations will be easy or painful depends on how much the individual can understand them and accompany the forces. So here, knowing about this force helps to comprehend what is going on. You know, people can go, well, look, all this shit is happening and I don't know why. And then you look at a person's chart and you go, you know, your life is actually about transforming. You're going to have several experiences which are confronting, but the intention is that you overcome and, you know, become stronger. This is what's happening, you know, particularly with the Sun-Pluto. There can be phenomenal resistance and solidity which allows one to cope with infinitely more than the average person can take. And even if they appear frail and, you know, they have the potential to survive holocausts, in fact. You know, even if they appear to be shattered, they will stand again and renewed and greater at the end of whatever turmoil they've been through. This is what a Sun-Pluto does in a person's chart. And whilst this is a challenge, it has enormous potential for power, which equates eventually to self-empowerment. Once these people have overcome, wow, they're unstoppable. It's an amazing force. The difficulty here is the depth to which individuals endure the high pressure of intensity. You know, emotions can be like nuclear explosions, but often underground ones. That's Pluto. So that even their closest friends may not realize what is happening inside them. And sometimes the intensity is so deep and hidden that they may not completely acknowledge it themselves. You just don't know how intense you are. So this force it's actually fantastic in a person's chart. It sounds awful though, but I actually have this in my own chart, and I can totally attest to it being difficult. It is. Yet I can also see the power of it. For me personally, comprehending what was going on inside me gave me a sense of relief. It's the not knowing about the forces at play that can make it difficult. So once I knew its purpose and the end goal, my attitude changed. I stopped fighting it and went with it. Okay, see how it's working? So a Mercury here is opposite Jupiter. So this person, and their Mercury is in Gemini, their Jupiter is in Sagittarius. Both forces are actually strong on their own, but the combination here is pretty cool. So Jupiter expands the Mercury and the mercurial mind. So it gives this person broad-mindedness and the capacity to see the big picture in things. It gives organizational skills. A Mercury without structure is just all over the place. Blah. Mercury with Jupiter can have an excessive element to the personality. So, you have to watch out with this set of forces that the person doesn't know how to shut up. It's a lot of talking. They may exaggerate and have difficulty getting to the point, and they can often neglect details, right? If this is is strong in a person's chart, I'd be asking, how are you using it? How are you using this communication skill that you have? So if a person is forever in their head, chatting away or having 1,000 thoughts, it may be useful to begin writing. So get the words out of the head and down on paper. So there's a flow happening. You're using the mind. It's not just the hamster wheel going. So do something useful with it. Be mindful also. Be mindful here, because we're all different and we've all got different personalities. So be mindful not to bore people with incessant talking that has no depth and meaning. This can happen with the Jupiter Mercury. So these people have a lot to say, and if you have this, make sure you are interesting. Make sure that what it is that you talk about has got some substance, because you might find you're forever in, all you ever do is gossip and talk about nothing interesting. All right? If people don't stay in your company after you've been blah, blah, blahing for a long time, it's probably because whatever it is you're talking about just doesn't interest them. But again, these people have a lot to say. Okay, the moon Mars, it's a trine. So the trine is an angle of 120 degrees. And there's usually a flow between these energies. Same with the sextile, there's flow, right? With the trine, it's easier. But with a trine, you've got to use it. You've got to be mindful of it. So it can depend on the planets involved as to how easy or difficult trines can be. Depends on the planet. So this combination, it's quite disharmonious, and anyone with these two will need to do some inner work. And that's so that you can cope and integrate the opposite values that these have. All right. So with me, when I see this in a chart, I go, okay, there's a problem here. I bet you there's a problem. And there generally is. And it's often with the mother, because the moon represents the mother. So, person, if you've got this, you have a fiery moon which gives emotional stamina and passion. It's like the moon is stoked by the will of Mars. They'll have a burning imagination and can become extremely enthusiastic about projects and people. Projects to do with people is a big moon thing, right? And Mars gives it will. So a negative to this combination can be agitation, because the moon's tendency towards chaos is driven by a willful Mars force. And they can be difficult to be around because they can create chaos. Interesting. So if they are doing that and they're getting a backlash, this is part of the questions that I would be asking. How are you going with your interactions with other people? And, how did you go with your mum? Was there an issue there? And I bet you there was. This moon, moon represents the mind as well. So with this combination, there could be difficulty for people quietening their mind. Thoughts are always not far away, and then there can be restless emotions. These people also are never satisfied, as in, they have an attitude that whatever is happening, it's never good enough. Or they themselves think they are not good enough. This can come with a Mars moon. Okay, so again, you've got this in your chart, so you've got to navigate. You've got to, okay, you have to learn how to be satisfied with yourself and say, yeah, I'm good enough, right? But first, you're going to go through this feeling of being less than or not good enough. It's one of the most common personality issues is I'm not good enough. I'm a piece of crap. So it's very, very common to have. Maybe there's a lot of people with Moon Mars afflictions in their charts, but you'd have to be working on it. You have to get the moon emotional nurturing side, which is stoked by Mars, and learn to navigate it. And it's going to make you more awakened. In fact, if you can master this and strengthen yourself, it's actually going to make you more awakened. It's not so bad. Everything's got a positive, guys. Everything. Sounds bad in the beginning. And then there's the Jupiter-Neptune. Now, I can't see a negative to the Jupiter and Neptune. So this person has a Jupiter sextile to Neptune. It's a beautiful set of forces. If you were to add Venus to this, even better. Absolutely beautiful. These people are great to be around. They're compassionate. It gives empathy and immense compassion. High ideals these people have. They can have deep experiences and revelations through music. Music is a big thing to the Jupiter-Neptune people. And often these people can become mystics, as the combination is very spiritual in nature. Often if I see psychics, wherever, online, whatever, I often go, oh yeah, they've got a strong Neptune. And, probably it's a Jupiter-Neptune. Most likely they have. And if people have this in their chart, and I'm doing a reading for them, I will ask whether their psychic abilities have come online. If not, because often they don't, I'll push the envelope. And it's quite common for vision to be, quashed in people, particularly as it's not fostered in any way. Spirituality has been, prevented in so many people. Kids see things and the parent just knocks it out of them. Oh, don't be silly. It's not developed. So some people never get the opportunity to do spiritual work, or for some reason they don't take opportunities when they are presented. That's another part. You know, there are many people out there who don't have a reference for what is happening within themselves. So as a practitioner, I'll help clients bring out their inner vision, particularly if I see it in their chart and they're not using it. It's like, oh, just a minute. No, can't have that. You know, there are many combinations of forces, as I've said. You know, your chart, it's a blueprint of all the forces that you have at your disposal. You know, you have a Pluto, Saturn, you have Saturn, Mars, and Pluto moons, and Saturn moons, and Saturn Neptunes, and all that sort of thing. And they each have their own different way of influencing you. Okay. Having these forces available to you is one thing, but using them is another. But knowing what is available helps you look at your life and ask what is happening. You know, why are you not speaking up if you have a Mercury and Jupiter combination? You certainly could, but do you? What are you doing with it? Or do you fear speaking up? Why? So it's inner work is required. You know, is it fear because, you know, Saturn is too strong in your chart? And are you a control freak and don't dare step out of your comfort zone? These are all things that you can see in a chart. You know, the negatives that come from forces are usually because of an inability to use them. So if you are not using them, you are likely to have a wanting and a voice inside you wanting it. But you don't dare. And you then start asking, why don't I have this? Why don't I have things in my life? You know, you could be having daydreams about wanting to do something. You have the forces available, but not the know-how or the courage. So if this is the case, it pays to do, you know, a course perhaps to get yourself up to speed in order to use the forces. You know, if you're supposed to be a leader, then go and do a course on leadership skills. And you might find that once you're in that course, you go, oh my God, I can do this. It's not as hard as what you thought it was. You just never had the opportunity. So you've got to give yourself the opportunity to bring out the forces, right? And then God help the world. You're a leader and you do leadership things. You know, I know before I had my chart done, I had many desires and that I never thought I could possibly achieve. You know, they were just daydreams. But reading my chart, I was presented with a lot of potential. And it was there in black and white. You know, even seeing this potential, I didn't feel I could live up to the amazing forces that I had available, you know. For some of them, it just seemed impossible to be what they said I could do, I could be. It's like, wow, is that me? Can I really do that? You know. But the desire to fulfill my own potential, it never left, because I had that voice in my head. I had the wanting. I was just too frightened. You know, and I think it was the Sun-Pluto square that I have that made sure that I never gave up. And I have a strong Mars. And so there was always that will force that was pushing me forward to at least have a go. So it just leads me to the missing bits that I mentioned. So missing bits, it's a term for parts of you that have been, quashed, and it's usually through trauma. So they're not believing you could possibly achieve what is in your daydreams can reinforce the inabilities you think you have. So you have forces in your chart that show great promise, but you are too fearful to bring that part of you into the world. They're missing. They haven't been developed, but you know that they're there, or you wish they were there. And maybe you had memories, way past memories of being amazing. Maybe your daydreams are about being amazing. It's likely that you've got missing bits. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having the thoughts. And it takes inner work to sort out what is going on with these missing parts of your psyche. So this is where regression helps. Regression healing is something that I do, and it helps enormously to get clarity on what has happened in the past that makes you so fearful. Now, interestingly, when I work with a client on regression, I generally get their chart details because it just shortcuts so much because I can see what's going on. I have a really good reference point for things that have most likely gone wrong with a person, and we sort it out. Okay. Now, it may take some baby steps to overcome the fears and gradually walk into the part of you that can achieve things. So your chart becomes a guide for you. Knowing what astral forces you have at your disposal helps you navigate life. So if you use the positive elements of the forces, there will be a flow that happens. If you use the destructive negative forces, you are likely to have many difficulties. But what you master in this life becomes part of your transformed astral body. It's like getting an A or an A+ on your report card. And your soul continues its evolution, and it becomes more full than it ever was before. Your soul evolution, it's huge. It's a big one, guys. Okay. So it's not the entertaining horoscope thing that you thought it was. Astrology is, it's a really good tool to have. So I hope this has helped you comprehend astrology in a way that makes sense. And so you know why it's an art form, and it's an art form worth learning. So even if you don't become an expert, at the very least, you become more aware of what makes you tick. As you know, I do this craft for a living. It's my passion. So if you feel you would like to know about your astral body, please get in touch for reading via my website. Now, it is my profession, so it's not something that I do for free. I've spent, as I said, close on 25 years of knowledge that you have. Plus, I walk the talk. So that's what you're paying for. Plus, there's 2 hours it takes me to collate a chart and study it, and I spend another 2 hours at least. It's generally 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours with you going through your chart. So I'm not going to do that for free, guys. Just come on. I do all these podcasts for free, and that's my compassionate giving to humanity. Okay, so again, I hope you've got a lot out of it. So if you've liked what you've heard today, please do the usual, hit the like button, share, and don't forget to comment below. And if you have questions you'd like answered, please place it in the comments below. And this whole podcast came from somebody's comment. So I hope that person sees this or listens to this podcast and gets something out of it. Okay. So thank you again, guys. Take care. Have a great week, and I will see you again very soon. Bye for now.